against the large banks that have come to occupy every level of government and influence around the globe. Let's go, Gialbo.
Yeah, Stacy Herbert, you and I have permanently transformed the vocabulary of what people use according to Urban Dictionary, which of course is the People's Dictionary. So global insurrection against banker occupation, we introduced that term on this show. Now it has become part of the vernacular of this global insurrection against banker occupation.
Well, I also put out there on Facebook and Twitter for inviting people to send in their artwork. And this image here is from Michael Denning. Every revolution needs a man with a vision. Keiser report. And you see the RT logo down there on the left, and you also see 200.
Well, RT deserves big kudos because they have covered this global insurrection unlike any other network in the world. You know, it's becoming really their signature, and they are trouncing the competition because they were totally ahead of the crowd. Now the mainstream in the US and the UK is just waking up to what RT has been covering for months.
Well, let's talk about why there is a Gialbo, why there is a global insurrection against banker occupation. Eurozone pushing for tougher policing of Greece. According to this Reuters article, some Eurozone countries want a European Commission task force to be given extra powers to oversee the sale of Greek state assets and the country's civil service under a far-reaching plan to tighten supervision of Athens. The source said there was a need to take over some of the sovereign functions of the state to get the machine running. The proposal would involve sending hundreds of these austerity police force, is what you can call it, to Greece.
This is exactly what we warned about. When we were down in Greece, we told the people directly, face to face, that they were going to lose their sovereignty, that the outside banking collective would take their assets based on debts that they themselves imposed onto Greece, that Greece never imposed on themselves. And now they're going forward, and they will use force. This is worse than the junta. The troika is much worse than the junta.
Well, exactly. And the protests this week in Greece were bigger than the ones in 1974 when the junta was forced to leave. But listen, this source told Reuters, the idea is living in some capitals, this idea that there needs to be an austerity police force. There is no alternative.
Oh, ding dong, hello, Margaret Thatcher. Remember during the beginning of the Reagan-Thatcher era, which incidentally in the US was the beginning of the bailouts for banks. Reagan initiated this whole bank bailout initiative. And at the time, he said, oh, well, it'll never happen again. But of course, it became the precedent for how America does business going forward. But Margaret Thatcher said this, there is no alternative. TINA, as it became known. And this was a falsehood then. It was merely a pretext to bring in financialization, to replace manufacturing, gut the economy, put millions of people out of work, and if they complain, start wars and send them off to foreign countries and get them blown apart. Now they're repeating TINA. There is no alternative. There was an alternative then, and there is an alternative now. It's called insurrection.
Well, exactly. Lady Liberty should go beat the out of TINA because she is with the monarchs of the global financial system. TINA is the one telling us there is no alternative but subjugation and slavery.
That can't stand. And the people of Greece now, the ball is going back into their court on the global insurrection against banker occupation, and they have it within their purview, within their wherewithal right now to trip banking catastrophe in Europe to save their sovereignty. Get to it!
Now, if Americans think they're not going to be confronted with TINA, Bank of America takes sleaze to a new level. Yes, Bank of America quietly moved $53 trillion in derivatives from its holding company to its subsidiary that holds $1 trillion in customer deposits and is insured by the FDIC. If any part of these derivatives blow up, the taxpayer will then be on the hook for the $1 trillion in deposits.
This is just another example of abusing all the non-existent banking regulations to benefit insiders in the banks like Bank of America, of course, now it's part of Merrill Lynch, and a couple of other banks they threw in there. And they're using this technique of playing musical chairs with trillions and trillions of debt. The goal, of course, is always to get that debt lined up with depositors and then rape the depositors unmercifully and with extreme prejudice.
Well, TINA there is no alternative. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, who set in motion this banking catastrophe we have, were also present during the collapse of communism, where the system collapsed because the people just stopped working and then rebelled against the oligarchs who were taking everything. Well, we see that same situation happening today, Max. Here are some really interesting headlines from America. Toll of heavy drinking on U.S. economy rises. So heavy drinking is costing the U.S. economy more than $200 billion a year, mostly in lost workplace productivity, a U.S. health agency said on Monday. This is nearly 21% higher than the last time they did this study in 1998.
The Cold War ended and Russia won because effectively America continued its Cold War economic policies of price fixing and crowding out of productive economic activity in favor of the oligarchy, Federal Reserve banking, economic non-entity.
Well, the fact is, Max, if you look at the charts of U.S. productivity since Tina arrived on the scene, every single dollar of productivity, every single one of those dollars went to the top 1%. So why be more productive in your work? Why not show up drunk? Why not stay home with a hangover? Why turn up to work when the oligarchs are only going to take that money and use it to increase their power, to buy more Ronald Reagans, to buy the next politician?
Well, yes. When I was working on Wall Street, I was at a firm called Oppenheimer. And famously, when I was there, one of the brokers fell over drunk and hit the floor and passed out. The manager at the time, by the initials DT, simply walked over, picked him up, put him back in his chair, put the phone in his hand, and dialed the phone and said, "Keep dialing, son." So in other words, drunk, drug-addled automatons whose sole purpose is to financially rape people is the model, and it's continuing unabated because nobody in Washington, or no regulation, is stepping forward to stop.
This propaganda in this article continues that 72% of this alleged lost $180 billion cost was due to lost productivity, and most of the cost was borne by the drinkers themselves in the form of lost income. But like I said, that lost income, you should just lose that income. Continue to drink more. If this is the way that Americans can respond like the Greeks and take down the banking system, them just staying home drunk.
Well, remember the cigarette companies, their argument for why they should not be forced to outlaw cigarette smoking is that cigarette smoking killed so many people per year that the economy ultimately would save on healthcare costs. Now, yes, if people drink themselves to death, they're going to save money in healthcare costs. That's true. If people are sent to foreign occupations and get murdered for no reason other than to make bankers a few bucks. So yes, that I suppose could be the basis of your economy. But how is that different than, let's say, running a concentration camp or Pol Pot or anybody else, these other dictators? How is Hank Paulson, and Lloyd Blankfein, and Jamie Dimon not a mass murderer? Send me an email right now to explain that to me. I don't see the difference.
Well, in fact, Max, you could call Lloyd Blankfein. Here's a headline. Call Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein on his cell phone and cheer him up. The number is 917-743-0939. I'm sure he has a new one by now, but apparently somebody released his cell phone number into the public domain. And the reason why they're saying you should cheer him up is because Goldman Sachs just reported a nearly $500 million loss in the third quarter. Some of the suggested messages are, I know you just lost $500 million, but look on the bright side. You've set aside $10 billion in bonuses to pay out to your 34,200 employees. Or, hey, just do what I do when I run out of money. Head over to the Fed's discount window and borrow more at no interest.
Well, it's amazing that Goldman can lose any money. I think they just do that for show. Because, for example, we know through high-frequency trading, they steal $100 million a day on the New York Stock Exchange floor, gratis, no cost for that whatsoever. And all the other government programs they get bailed out on, and all the risk arbitrage, positive interest rate, cash flow, currency spreads that they put on every single day, or the volatility spreads that they get paid on every time they announce false rumors or manipulate the market in some way. So these losses are just for show. They're hoping to keep their heads attached to their bodies. Will it work? I doubt it.
If they're going to live by the fraud, they should die by the fraud. But one more sign of this, the collapse of America. Just 1 in 7 U.S. workers are normal weight. without chronic health issue. So Gallup estimates that 450 million days of work a year are missed because of weight and other health problems, resulting in an estimated cost of $153 billion in lost productivity. Again, that's good. You don't want that money going to Lloyd Blankfein anyway. He would just use it to hire a mercenary army to go overthrow some other government somewhere and steal their oil and resources.
Well, in order to have a competitive economy, you need to attract the competitive elements in the economy. Let me explain something. People in America who would be competitive and create jobs, create companies, create growth, are not doing so because it's not competitive. It's so easy to just put on an algorithmic trading program and make a few $billion that it doesn't attract any real competitors. I mean, myself, for example, I could be over there doing jobs, creating companies, and hiring people if it was competitive, if it was interesting. But it's so uninteresting that it's not even worth my time. How to make it interesting? Start raising interest rates. This would weed out all of the posers and the Lloyd Blankfeins and the Jamie Dimons who don't really compete. They're just sucking on the government teat. And it would bring in real competitors, people like myself, for example. But until that happens, I'd rather just sit by the sidelines and watch the whole thing collapse.
Well, apparently a lot of people are showing up at work and just sitting on the sidelines. It's called presenteeism. And they said if you counted that the losses in productivity to the U.S. economy could be as high as $1.1 trillion.
Trillion here, trillion there. Eventually it adds up to real money. Okay, Stacy Herbert, you're coming back for part 2, aren't you?
I was going to occupy Keiser Report as a special Giabo episode, but you let them know.
All right. Stay tuned.